So we've been making some Lego models this week to go with our story. And to help us, we've built some walls of Jericho, including the gates. And here are some more Lego models for you to spot in the story.
Joshua. Priests. Army.
And here is the Ark of the Lord, which reminded them that God was with them. Let's read Joshua chapter 6, starting with verse 1. Can you find the picture that goes with this verse?
Now the gates of Jericho were securely barred because of the Israelites. No one went out, and no one came in.
That's right, it was the picture showing the gates and walls of Jericho. Did you notice in the verse that it said that they were all shut? Jericho was in lockdown. Nobody was coming in, and nobody was going out. They've heard about what God has done for the Israelites, all about his mighty power. But they're not willing to give up their land, even if God has given it to the Israelites. Let's read a few more verses and hear about God's plan.
Then the Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its king and its fighting men. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times, with the priests blowing their trumpets. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have the whole army give a loud shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse, and the army will go up, everyone straight in."
Oh, it's a bit of a strange plan. This marching and trumpets, do-do-do-do, and finally a big shout. Now, you don't usually get what you want by stomping about making lots of noise, do you? And surely Joshua would have known that the best way to get into Jericho would have been to pile the dirt against the walls and then climb over. Will God's plan work? Let's read on and let's find the next 4 pictures in the story.
So Joshua son of Nun called the priests and said to them, "Take up the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and have 7 priests carry trumpets in front of it." And he ordered the army, "Advance, march around the city, with an armed guard going ahead of the ark of the Lord."
So the next 4 pictures were Joshua,
The priests
the Ark of the Lord.
and the army.
Well done if you got those. Let's see the rest of the story now from verses 8 to 16 and 20.
When Joshua had spoken to the people, the 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets before the Lord went forward, blowing their trumpets, and the ark of the Lord's covenant followed them. The armed guard marched ahead of the priests, who blew the trumpets, and the rear guard followed the ark. All this time the trumpets were sounding. But Joshua had commanded the army, "Do not give a war cry, do not raise your voices, do not say a word until the day I tell you to shout. Then shout." So he had the ark of the Lord carried around the city, circling it once. Then the army returned to camp and spent the night there. Joshua got up early the next morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord. The 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets went forward, marching before the ark of the Lord and blowing the trumpets. The armed men went ahead of them, and the rear guard followed the ark of the Lord, while the trumpets kept on sounding. So on the 2nd day they marched around the city once, and returned to the camp. They did this for 6 days. On the 7th day, they got up at daybreak and marched around the city 7 times in the same manner, except that on that day they circled the city 7 times. The 7th time around, when the priests sounded the trumpet blast, Joshua commanded the army, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." When the trumpet sounded, the army shouted, and at the sound of the trumpet, when the men gave a loud shout, the wall collapsed, so everyone charged straight in, and they took the city.
And that's our last picture, the fallen down city walls. God had won a great victory in Jericho and kept his promise to the Israelites to give them a land. But what about our other Joshua, Jesus? Jesus said that he'd have to suffer and die and rise again 3 days later for God's plan to save people. His disciples didn't think that that was the right plan either. So when Jesus did suffer and die on a cross, it looked like his mission had failed. They didn't feel strong and courageous at all. But by God's mighty power, Jesus did rise again on the 3rd day. He had defeated our greatest enemies of sin, the devil, and death. God won the greatest victory for us to be forgiven and to look forward to a new life with him one day. Do you trust God to save you?
Hi everyone, we miss you. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord our God will be with you wherever you go. Joshua 1 verse 9. Bye.
Be
strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid or discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Joshua 1 verse 9.
Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Joshua 1 verse 9.